Hello and welcome. The International Atomic Energy Agency claims to be an impartial guardian of global nuclear security, yet its stance on Iran's nuclear program raises critical questions. Why does the agency adopt a stringent posture against Iran while overlooking similar concerns elsewhere? Has the IAEA become a tool for Western political interest rather than an independent body committed to fair assessments? Tonight, we unravel these contradictions, dissecting the agency's shifting narratives and exploring Iran's response to what it perceives as an unjust, politically motivated campaign. Is nuclear diplomacy truly about non-proliferation, or is it a geopolitical game played at Iran's expense? Welcome to Spotlight. I am Bahman Noura, your host. Let us begin with a short report.
Iran fired back strongly at a recent IAEA claim, pointing out the meticulous level of transparency Tehran maintains.
The agency reports each and every gram of the uranium of Iran to the board and each and every scientific indicator to the board. With all this information claiming that Iran is not cooperating or does not have transparency is very ironic and very strange.
The same time.
Irony indeed. Because just today, the agency's Director General, Rafael Grossi, reminded the Board of Governors that while uranium enrichment is not banned legally, the agency remains unable to confirm that all Iranian nuclear activities are exclusively peaceful.
That enriching uranium per se is not a forbidden activity, which is something my Iranian counterparts always tell me, and they tell the world. So that is true.
Contradicting his own remarks, the IAEA chief goes on to say that the amount of enriched uranium in Iran is not sufficient to produce a nuclear weapon, explaining that creating a bomb requires highly sophisticated technologies, including advanced detonators. Perhaps there is another reason.
Thoroughly, with a very strong verification and monitoring chapter from us, would give the necessary assurance for Israel and for the world that there is nothing to be feared.
Iran's nuclear program has already been under the microscope for decades. Now the agency is saying this should go on partly for the sake of assuring Israel, a regime that's not a member of the non-proliferation treaty and is already in possession of nuclear weapons. Ironically, Iran's detailed transparency is being questioned. Critics argue the agency's actions are politically motivated, influenced by certain European countries and the US, whose geopolitical interests appear to influence the decisions of what is meant to be an impartial nuclear watchdog. The IAEA is walking a tightrope between scientific oversight and political pressure, resulting in allegations of bias and double standard. Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has bluntly called out such moves.
Countries and governments are not allowed to enact laws based on nationality, race, religion, or ethnicity, as this is certainly discriminatory. However, for us Iranians, it is yet another clear sign of the depth of America's hostility.
The question remains, is this truly about nuclear non-proliferation, or a politically charged campaign framed by selective and biased approaches? Iran stands firm, asserting that every step of its nuclear program is transparent, monitored, and peaceful, backed by reports and inspections made by the UN atomic watchdog.
Welcome back. Allow me to introduce my guests. Reza Vedadi, academic, researcher and author, joining us from Muscat. And Fra Hughes, journalist, author and activist, joining us from Belfast. Gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to have you on the program. Reza, I'm going to start with you. Rafael Grossi has acknowledged that uranium enrichment per se is nothing illegal, but why the harsher treatment and inspection on Iran?
Well, you have to step back and look at the whole nuclear issue regarding Iran and the IAEA and the international community with a wider lens. This Grossi, the head of the IAEA, there's talk that he wants to get into the position of General Secretary for the UN. So he's doing his best to please the United States and the Europeans that have very large influence on the international body. And on a number of occasions, the IAEA has reported that Iran's nuclear program has been peaceful during the JCPOA, if you remember, 2015, 2016, 17 era. And we already know from the United States security establishment that since 2003, there's no evidence that Iran was making any attempts to produce any nuclear weapons. So all of this information is out there. Everyone already knows this. So then we step back and we look at what is the problem that they have with Iran. So they pick on, small, minute, tiny atoms that they found in one part or another. That Iran has argued that it was sabotage, it was put there. There's no evidence that Iran has any kind of nuclear program. However, the people that are making the claims against Iran, the United States, Europeans, they all have massive nuclear weapons. Israel that provides unverified, alleged kind of information and evidence to IAEA to then go after Iran itself is not even part of the NPT. It's part of the IAEA organization, but it's not signed up to the NPT. So you have a member who's not part of the NPT, safeguarding body, giving information which is not verified to the IAEA, and then IAEA uses this as evidence, and then Iran has to prove that it's not correct. So we clearly see that it's a political body. The obvious question also is then, what's the next stages, right? If they keep pushing this, are they trying to bring back the snapback sanctions? And if they are, what would be Iran's counter to what the pressure IAEA is putting on behalf of their Western bloc, which is United States, Israel, and the European allies?
Right, Reza, of course, I'm going to bring in the issue of Israel later on in the conversation. But now let's get to Fra. Given the IAEA's selective treatment and approach towards nuclear enrichment, should Iran consider this treatment as part of a broader geopolitical strategy?
Well, absolutely. It's all interconnected. I just want to say the first thing I thought about when I heard what the IAEA is saying, it automatically and immediately brought me back to Iraq. What we're witnessing now is a recurring process of imperialist interactions within West Asia. If you go back to Iraq, if you go back to the weapons of mass destruction, the lie that was perpetrated, the lie that went round the world, that weapons, chemical weapons could be used, biological weapons, and could be fired upon Britain within 45 minutes from Iraq. Now, David Kelly, who was one of the inspectors on behalf of the United Nations, was originally a member of the British kind of biochemistry industry. He was connected with Portland Down in Britain, which is their biological laboratory. He apparently said in an unguarded recorded interview with BBC Radio 4 that 45-minute timeline, which was put around the world, was encouraged by Alistair Campbell, a member of the British Parliament and the British government at that time. They were creating the consensus and the narrative within the public domain to have a war on Iraq. And what we're witnessing now is exactly the same thing. The Iranians have told the world that they have no intention of creating a bomb. There is a fatwa that forbids that against the Islamic faith in the murder of innocent civilians during conflict. So what we have is the West using the IAEA exactly as they did with the UN weapons inspectors in Iraq. And David Kelly, 2 days after appearing before a British Foreign Affairs Select Committee, who specifically asked him about the 45 minutes, was found dead, apparently committed suicide 2 days later. So that's the West trying to create a consensus for war on Iran, in my opinion.
Right. Reza, I was listening to Rafael Grossi, Director General of the IAEA, earlier today, saying that, admitting that Iran does not have sufficient amount of enriched uranium for bomb level or weaponizing level or grade. So why so many warnings and concerns? Why expressing so much concern while he is himself admitting that Iran does not have the needed amount of enriched uranium for building a bomb?
As your other guest clearly stated, it's a war of narratives right now. And this war of narratives, as Ayatollah Khamenei has stated before, is almost as powerful and important as the hard war. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to build consensus amongst the elite, not even necessarily the masses, because a lot of the masses since the war on Gaza in the last 2 years have become anti-establishment. And I say establishment in the sense that the propaganda the establishment feeds them. So what they're trying to do is create a consensus, try to create a narrative that there needs to be some kind of pressure put into Iran. What that pressure would be could be through sanctions, but Iran's already under sanctions. It could be through military use, which I highly doubt they have the capability. Iran is a very advanced military defense. And so they know that, and hence they're trying to find other ways they can put pressure on Iran. However, we have to look at, after this, what will happen. After this pressure, after this IAEA pressure of trying to force Iran into some kind of a position that they know Iranians won't accept. Since Ayatollah Khamenei only 3-4 days ago made it very clear that Iran will not stop enrichment under any circumstances. And we all know that they will start with the nuclear program, the peaceful nuclear program, and it won't end there. It will be then human rights issues they will put pressure on. They use another body to put pressure on Iran's missile defense program. So Iranians and many others have realized that the issue isn't any technical issue or how can I say, breaking of rules by Iran. It's a political game that they're playing. And Iran isn't the Iran of 2015 when they signed up to the JCPOA, because 2015, they were not as strong militarily, and they did not have the relations that they have with the other major powers, which is Russia and China, that they have at the moment. So we all know it's a game, we all know it's a narrative. I think Iran Foreign Ministry and its atomic agency need to work harder to, and I believe Ayatollah Khamenei said this, to educate not only the Iranians, but others outside of Iran, that this is a game that is being played by the hegemonic powers to put pressure on Iran, to weaken Iran, to elevate Israel. That's all it is. They're trying to elevate Israel by weakening Iran.
Right. And Farah, given the IAEA's allegations and also the constant non-stop waves of threats from the Western side, should Iran interpret all of this as a sign that these powers are just after limiting its technological progress? Because when we look at other countries with the same similar types of capabilities, we do not see the same type of treatment.
Well, it's a continuation of the attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran from 1979. This is just the latest chapter in the book of the war against the Iranian society, the revolution, and the current government. What they're doing is they're going to create potentially a narrative that Iran is, Netanyahu says, 2 weeks away from creating a bomb, which we all know is a lie. We all know it's a fallacy. We all know this is propaganda being used by the Zionists in order to try and defeat another member of the axis of resistance who are a bulwark against the expansionist, Zionist, racist state. So what they potentially will want to do is try and push the agenda further and further along the line of they're having a bomb, they're making a bomb, this is going to endanger everyone in the region. Someone must bomb the nuclear sites in Iran. So that's the narrative that they're using. Iran's in a no-win situation. You can open up all the sites as they have done. You can welcome the inspectors and give them full cooperation. And at the end of the day, no matter what you do, they will just simply say, if Donald Trump, for example, was to say, can you prove they are not secretly trying to make a bomb somewhere in Iran that you're unaware of? Of course, they're going to say, well, we can't prove that that's not the ultimate aim. So it's part of the propaganda war. It's part of the war against Iran, both internally and externally. And it is for the benefit of Zionism and the benefit of the Israeli state. And what it really comes down to is the West and is America prepared to start a war against Iran on behalf of the Zionists? That is a $64,000 question which is yet to be answered.
Right, Reza, Iran has accused the IAEA, of course, of acting on false reports provided by Israel, which, of course, has been backed by the European Troika and the US. But if this is true, what does that tell the world about the credibility of the agency itself?
Well, the IAEA, if they're taking evidence from a country that's not even part of the NPT, and they're acting upon that, and they're asking the country that is part of the NPT, that has the most restrictive inspection of any country in the history of the IAEA NPT program, and saying to it that you need to prove something that we're claiming which is not true. It's very difficult to prove something that is not true to be true. So it's just the whole question is wrong. The whole framing of the question is wrong. And the fact that the IAEA is being used as a political political mechanism to put pressure on Iran, that needs to be, properly explained to audiences around the world. The IAEA isn't some kind of scientific, it's not based on impartial, evidence-based data. It's being politicized, but we have to explain how it's being politicized and how the process is impacting how people see the. I mean, if you got Pakistan on one side, you have India on another side. They're not part of the NPT, and yet they have nuclear weapons, and there's no fuss going on over there. Iran, if it wanted to have nuclear weapons, if you watch Iranian programs in Farsi, you will see that the people who are involved in the nuclear management of the country said, if we wanted nuclear weapons, we could have had it 20 years ago, but we do not want it. We have a fatwa against it, and we do not require it. However, it's almost as if they want to push Iran to the point of where Iran may develop even a tactical nuclear weapon, which won't be a mass weapon of destruction, but it will be a powerful enough weapon to attack, for example, a American base or an Israeli base. But it feels like as if they want to push Iran towards that direction. If you look also North Korea was part of the NPT. It left NPT in 2003, 2004. Why? Because all the pressure that was being put onto it. It was threatened, constantly was threatened with attacks. The only country that's threatening anyone is Israel and the United States. They threatened to annihilate Iran and Iranian infrastructure. So what does Iran have to do other than defend itself?
Right, Farah, could we take a step further based on what Reza just said, that Iran should reconsider its own engagement and form of relation with the agency now?
Well, again, this is just my personal opinion, but all the countries in the world that have nuclear weapons all claim that they are purely defensive. They are not offensive weapons, and they will only be used in the event of an existential threat against their country and their society. So if we take that as the baseline, well, why couldn't Iran have a nuclear deterrent? That's what the British have. French have, that's what the Germans have, that's what the Americans have. North Korea hasn't been attacked because it has a nuclear deterrent. So there is a case to be made that Iran, if it had a nuclear deterrent, that would actually prevent an attack upon the Iranian society and the Iranian nation. So, if everybody else has one, then why can't Iran have one? But the fact that you mentioned that the Israelis are giving all this false information to the IAEA. Who would believe a genocidal government supported by 82% of its population who want to turn Gaza into a car park? Who would believe a word that they would say other than corrupt officials working on behalf of a political agenda in order to promote Western hate and Western Islamophobia and Western machinations upon the internal politics of Iran and West Asia?
Right, for Reza, I'm going to talk about, of course, the elephant in the room. As you mentioned earlier in the conversation, the only country in the region with nuclear weapons, more than 400 nuclear warheads, that's Israel, of course. And that seems to be of no concern for the entire world, while Iran, as the country with the biggest number of inspections in all the activities of this IAEA, and the agency has been spending more time, more than 80% of its inspections has been focused on Iran, and at the same time they claim that Iran does not cooperate well and they are not satisfied with the level of cooperation. How do we see that in comparison?
In 1981, when they, I think, attacked the Iraqi nuclear reactor and they destroyed it, the Israelis, the Security Council in the UN wrote a resolution, so the Security Council, which includes the United States and the European countries, that the Israeli nuclear facilities need to go under inspection. However, what we have seen is that no matter how much some UN bodies at some occasions manage to get through and put pressure on Israeli regime, they're always backed by the Europeans and by the United States veto powers to prevent any extra pressure being put on them. One of the reasons why Iran hasn't, it could have, as I said, gone for a nuclear weapon. The reason it didn't is because it would fuel an arms race within the region. Then it would encourage Saudi Arabia, which has a vast wealth of money, to buy nuclear weapons from Pakistan very easily. Would have paid a few $billion, bought a few nuclear weapons. It becomes a nuclear weapon state. Then you have Turkey on the other side. They're capable. They have, technology advanced enough. They would have developed their own nuclear power, nuclear weapons possibly. So Iran, for many reasons, other than the fact that it's a weapon of mass destruction, knowing that it doesn't want to fuel an arms race, has not gone down that route. However, Israel, we know there's the Samsonite option, where they have threatened European countries and all the regional countries that if we ever have to go down, we'll take everyone with us. However, the Europeans, because their elites are allied with the Zionist agenda of colonizing that part of the world, they will turn a blind eye to no matter what the Israelis do. So one, nuclear weapons they've turned a blind eye to. Two, the fact that they're causing, as my colleague said, a genocide live on TV, live on social media. A genocide that is every single month, every single week, every single day shows an amount of depravity that you cannot even imagine. People who write horror films could not sit down and write the horror that we see on social media. But because of as I said, the correlation between the Europeans and the US with the Zionist colonizers, they will always support them to the end.
Right. I'm going to focus now on the scientific purposes of Iran's nuclear activities here. We had on the news earlier tonight that Iran is developing its second and third units of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, and it is using them for power generation, which is of essential need for the country. Iran is using, and also there is a contract right now signed between Iran and Russia to add 8 more power plants, 4 of them based in Bushehr again. So Iran is using this for radiopharmaceutical purposes. Why should the international community and the agency expect Iran to give up on its right now at this moment in history?
Well, there's no reason why Iran should stop its peaceful nuclear program. Nuclear energy is safer now, potentially, than it's ever been, with the safeguards, with the new technology and everything that goes along with that. France uses nuclear power in order to give electricity to its businesses and its domestic consumers. I mean, people talk about the green issue, they talk about the environment, they talk about the world and pollution. So a safe energy source that doesn't use fossil fuel is a very viable alternative. It is a great option if it's proven to be safe. So there's no reason why the Iranian nation should not continue in conjunction with the Russians and potentially others to improve the safeguards, to improve the quality, and to improve that structure and that infrastructure to help the people in Iran.
Thank you, gentlemen. I wanted this conversation to go on. I had so many more questions to ask you, but unfortunately, we have to end this here because of the time limits. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you once again. Reza Vedadi, academic, researcher and author, joining us from Muscat, and Frahi is journalist, author and activist joining us from Belfast. and the truth will always come out. Thank you so much for staying with us on another Spotlight. I am Bahman Nurai.